from the Salvation Army National Headquarters, this is the Fight for Good podcast.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fight for Good podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Foley, broadcasting from our national headquarters of the Salvation Army in the United States of America in Alexandria, Virginia. With me today, as always, is our War Cry editorial director, Mr. Jeff McDonald.
Greetings, Colonel Foley. So good to be with you today.
And things are well with you, sir, I take it?
Very well, very well. We're, still working remotely after a long siege of it, but still, thanks to technology and our commitment to doing the most good, we are managing quite well.
For the listeners and for the historical record, we are recording this on the first day of March in 2021, and we're just about 2 weeks away from our year anniversary. I know it's not an anniversary, but we departed the building a year ago, and our entire production team of our magazines and books has not all been together physically in the same place since mid-March of 2021. And it's, Jeff, I was thinking about that today. It's something I really kind of mourn. I miss that immensely. I think, that's nothing new. I think all of us do. But it has been amazing to me, again, how the team has pulled together and continues to pull together. The mental energy and the creative spirits that we have with our team. And my hat goes off continually to you for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Colonel. And it's, that's throughout the Army. I mean, the commitment of people to the mission is just invaluable.
Also, our the technology has increased or changed or altered or whatever, made life easier for our producer, Elizabeth, in putting together these podcasts. Hasn't it, Elizabeth?
It's been lovely.
In fact, we're sitting here now as we're broadcasting. We're looking at each other on like we're in each other's offices, but we use a software platform called Zencastr, and they've developed it so that there's the video technology. But Elizabeth, I'm looking over to my right here, and I'm seeing that little mixing board you used to use.
Yes, the mixing board.
I kind of get a feeling we're never going to go back to that. Am I correct?
I think it can be like a trophy of the past.
It could be. I mean,
antiquated.
That was obsolescence. Talk about obsolescence, man. That was
it's
quick.
Lovely though, like a doorstop or something.
It is, but it's just amazing how far we've come in a year, and also how our Fight for Good podcast is grown in content. It's been reduced in size a little bit. We try to be a little more mindful for that, but we thank our listeners for taking a few moments with us today. And we have with us today just somebody I admire, and I've come to know since I arrived here 2 years ago at national headquarters with my wife. But and I happen to work with his wife, because his wife is the Assistant National Secretary for Program, Lieutenant Colonel Jackie Bowers. And so with us today is Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bowers, who is the National Secretary of SAWSO. And Tom, I almost said SWASO. SWASO. But Colonel Bowers, we're so thankful. Thank you for taking a few moments to join us today with the Fight for Good podcast. And why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what is it you do here at National Headquarters?
Well, it's great to be with you today. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about SAWSO and the important work that we're doing. Just a little bit about my own background. My wife and I are finishing up our 43rd year as Salvation Army officers. And prior to our appointment here at National Headquarters, all of our appointments have been in the central territory of the United States, the 11 central states. We've had the privilege of serving at all the various levels. We've been in 3 different corps, spanning about 13 years, served at divisional headquarters different appointments. I was appointed as Divisional Youth and Candidate Secretary in Eastern Michigan, and the Divisional Secretary in St. Louis, and General Secretary in Chicago, as well as the Chicago area coordinator there, Divisional Commander in Western Michigan, Northern Indiana. So been pretty well spread out there. That it was there in WMNI in the Western Michigan, Northern Indiana division. I had the privilege of actually being a part of opening 2 Kroc centers, which I know you're familiar with. And that was after we had spent 6 years working on the one in Chicago. So we've had our exciting days with the Krocs. But right now, we've also served at territorial headquarters. As a territorial boys work director and divisional youth and territorial youth and candidate secretary. And then later on at THQ, I served as the community relations and development secretary. And that's where I really got my first dip into my toe into that international development arena. For about 6 years, I had the privilege of working with territorial leadership in Nigeria to assist them as they began their journey into financial independence. And that's where it was there that God began he put that flame in my heart, sparked that flame, and began a process of crafting a vision that actually led to the very work that I'm doing today. It's really amazing how God works through all of those various different appointments that we've had. Just a little bit about us, my background. To be honest with you, most people have no clue what SAWSO does. They heard the name. You were referring earlier, joking a little bit about SAWSO because it is mispronounced a lot. SAWSO is the Salvation Army World Service Office. And we're an international development organization, an INGO, international non-governmental organization. And our mission is very much the same as the international mission of the Salvation Army, to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to meet human need in his name without discrimination. And our purpose in SAWSO, the very reason for our existence, really is to support and represent the international development interest of the Salvation Army in America. We're here to serve the 4 U.S. territories and national leadership in their Salvation Army interest overseas. And most of the funds, that would flow from America to our Salvation Army work overseas would flow through our office. So it's an exciting place to be, and many opportunities to serve our comrades in other parts of the world.
One of the things that we're trying to do through our Fight for Good podcast is, give our listeners and give new people to the Salvation Army an understanding and maybe correct some misinformation out there about the ins and outs of how national headquarters works. I often use the metaphor that national headquarters is the Switzerland of the Salvation Army. We're not a territory. We don't have any power. We're here to resource. And a lot of officers don't really know. I mean, they've heard about SAWSO, and they know about World Services, and we raise money voluntarily on the local level to support the worldwide work of the Salvation Army. But tell our listeners a little bit, what happens to that dollar that's donated that makes its way to SAWSO? Could you give us like an example in recent days? Let's talk before the pandemic. Where do those dollars go?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned the internal fundraising efforts of the Salvation Army, the denomination, the World Services. You referred to World Services. It's kind of like the missionary fund for other denomination, and that's handled a certain way. And the territories have an awful lot of control about where that goes and how that's used. It simply flows through our office, and occasionally they'll ask us to get involved in providing technical support in those situations. But then there's a whole other set of funding that really comes from the American public, oftentimes through a major international disaster incident that would occur. The generosity of the American public just kicks in, and all the dollars that are collected in America that are sent to us, a local Salvation Army unit, will flow up through the chain and come to SAWSO, who is charged with the responsibility of working with international headquarters and the affected areas to program out those dollars. And I would say that one of the things we're very, very blessed and proud of is that every dollar that is received from the general public, 100% goes to the affected area to provide programs in that affected area. Our overhead costs in SAWSO are covered in other ways. We're very blessed to have a nice operating endowment, and basically our operational costs are covered through that endowment. So pretty much every dollar that comes in goes right out to the intended purpose that the donor would like. I don't know if that's helpful with the way those donations are used. But the World Services dollars is in combination of going, and that's the missionary type funds goes in combination to part of it with international headquarters and just some of the basic costs that they have in helping support territories in their operations and some of the areas where there's just a financial need for that. They can't support themselves. And then there's others where it's more project focused, where we call it mission support, where the territories are kind of put in their wish list to the international headquarters and donor offices like our territories, like SAWSO, are able to contribute to that and basically help them with some of the projects that they have. So it's a little bit different, the internal versus external, but the good news is it's all going 100% over to serve the people that need it most.
My understanding is that in addition to that whole funding labyrinth that you manage to control, take, and contribute to, that SAWSO handles projects also independently. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know that the Army's now at work in 131 countries. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And your staff, which is quite extensive, is pretty heavily involved in the Army's different 5 zones. So could you give us an idea of some of the projects that SAWSO's involved in, and also what is the philosophy behind those projects?
Well, being an international development organization, one of the things that and one of the ways and methods in which we approach our work is we don't go in and do for our Salvation Army comrades. We basically come alongside of them and support them in their effort to do the projects in their communities and in the way they see the need. And our job is basically supporting them through technical support, through resources, through any other type of support that we can provide them. SAWSO is involved in a lot of projects. We basically average over 200 projects at any given time in more than 60 countries. The total value of those projects exceeds $60 million. It's a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to make an impact around the Army world. And most of our programs are, while we don't limit the kind of projects we do, most of them fall under one of our sectors. And our sectors would be disaster response, education programs, health, anti-human trafficking, livelihoods, livelihoods being helping people to actually be able to sustain themselves, finding work, helping build capacity, providing resources they can get to the point where they can take care of themselves. Agriculture is another sector, and business and economic development. So most of our projects fall within one of those sectors. A lot of people wonder what we actually do, and we work together with our partners on the ground to help program and project development. With every project that we have a technical advisor that's been assigned and a project accountant that's assigned. They give attention to that project. We identify and assist in securing resources, develop and facilitate training, collaborate and monitor and evaluation, and assist as well in documenting and sharing best practices and lessons learned. So it's a wide array. We do have about 20 on our staff, half of which are what I would call our technical advisors. They're the ones that are the real experts with master's and doctorate degrees. They understand what it means to work in an international development arena. We don't go into a territory or to one of our partner countries and try to tell them what to do. We basically go in with the question, what can we do to be helpful? What is it that we might be able to assist you with? And learn together with them how to meet the needs in their communities that they're serving.
Colonel Foley, I know that one of the attributes of the Army is that the extensive network of the Army in the nation and worldwide is that the Army's on the ground and in the culture and in the community, so that when SAWSO comes alongside them, they're working with often local people, local and partnering with other organizations to help people really move towards self-sufficiency. And, we get to publish some of those articles and they're just remarkable, those projects.
Yeah, we like to cover a lot of things, Colonel Tom, that you and your team are doing around the world. And I know personally, having the privilege of visiting in developing countries, and recently, if you want to say recently, about 15 months ago, I was able to see how your office is supporting the work in Indonesia. Indonesia is a country that is almost the same size as America. And it's very interesting. It was interesting to talk with the local Salvation Army officers assigned there, how they work with your office, back in Washington, D.C. in those moments. I'm wondering what has been some of the challenges that you have faced with your team during this pandemic time.
Well, it's very difficult because such a big part of what our team does is they go out on the front line and are able to be shoulder to shoulder with the people that we're serving. It's difficult, and everything now is being done remotely. There's no international travel. Been a moratorium on that. It is amazing what you can get done through technology, through the internet. But remember, in many of the places where our projects are, they do not have that technology. And all the territorial headquarters that we work with, we do have, but it's just a little bit more difficult, considerably more difficult actually, and probably even more than that in the way it's affected SAWSO. It's the way it's affected our partners on the ground, because they have been so focused on our projects and their projects and working together. But when COVID hit, all those things just went into neutral, and their 100% of their focus became survival. Let's deal with the COVID issue. What can we do? And we were trying to provide resources and technical support, and everybody was kind of focused on COVID. So it's really slowed a lot of our progress down in some of the other projects. But our team is anxious to get back out. We're looking forward to things clearing up, and I know that our partners on the ground are looking forward to that as well. There's only so much you can do. You really need to be able to look face to face, eyeball to eyeball, right there in context, and to do the best job. But I'm really proud of our team. I think they're doing the best they could do under the circumstances.
Looking back during your tenure of SAWSO, what are some things you're really proud that you and your team have accomplished?
Well, it's amazing. We've spent so much time in the recent years trying to really develop our own capacity so we could serve even more. And in the process of doing that, we've more than doubled the number of projects that we're able to support, and more than doubled the amount of money that's actually being committed as well. And we have been blessed in that way. And right now, one of the challenges we're wanting to hold ourselves accountable to is, it's one thing to build quantity, but we need to make sure that we don't negatively affect quality. So we are working with one of our new initiatives this next year is what we call our MEAL initiative. MEAL meaning monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. And it's quite extensive, and our team has been under a lot of, I guess I'll call it pressure to try to do the very best they can in developing this new initiative. They've all gone through some special training. They're working on developing tools. They've worked with other international offices in developing performance indicators that relate to the UN development goals. There's tools and trainings and resources that are being aligned so we can fully implement this new initiative. It's going to have a tremendous impact on the quality of service. And while we don't believe that we've allowed our quality to go down, we don't believe we've necessarily increased our capacity there, while we've increased in so many other ways. So we're really targeting that. We want to not only provide more programs, we want to provide the very best that we possibly can. So we're really excited about that. Might not sound too exciting to the people on the outside, but for us international development folks, it's exciting stuff.
Yeah. Given your perspective on the Army world, what would you like listeners to know about the International Salvation Army from your experience?
We have phenomenal people around the world. Salvation Army leadership, as I've gone into their offices and sat with them and listened to them, I felt their hearts cry and their passion. they're people of vision and people that are spirit filled and really are the right people for where they're at. Our challenge as we come in and work with them is how can we take advantage of that wisdom and experience. The indigenous leadership knows so much that we don't know. There's so much that we need to learn to figure out ways that we can help even more than what we're doing now. One of the initiatives that we have right now is, and it's something that started actually when we first arrived. I believe it was, I believe it was God's intention of bringing us to SAWSO, was this new economic business and economic development. Capacity Building Partnership Initiative is another name that we give it. It's basically going into a territory and sitting down with leadership and just starting a conversation. What can we do to help you get to that point of financial independence where you're no longer having to rely on mama bird, to feed baby bird concept? How can we do for ourselves? When you've been around for 100 years in the country, you really don't need to be getting crumbs from above. And I don't mean to say that demeaningly. These are things that the leadership feels themselves. They're tired of having to hold out their hand. And what we're trying to do is help them to discover together how we can find the resources within the country through a variety of different ways to be able to sustain their operation independent of having to have someone externally provide those resources for them. And they're all wanting to do that. And as I ask that question, what's it going to take to get to that point of financial independence? It's amazing the answers that we get. They all have ideas, brilliant ideas, not ones that necessarily would automatically come to mind. And as we listen, we listen to those that might sound the most intriguing. We continue to probe, ask deeper questions, begin to think about the full implications of doing some of the things that they're talking about. And some of those ideas will rise to the surface, and we'll begin to start talking about, okay, now how can we begin to provide some resources and actually plan, develop a strategy, a comprehensive strategy to be able to try that and just see if it works, knowing full well that sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. But either way, we're going to learn in the process. And I cannot tell you how thrilled we are about the success of that initiative. We are seeing in project after project, territory after territory, becoming more and more empowered, feeling more and more capable of doing for themselves the simplest of things that you would be just. I think you'd all be blessed to see how hard they're working and how well it is working. And I think God has ordained this, and we're looking for continuing to look for exciting days ahead with minimal investment on our part. We see how God is turning that around and bringing them to a deeper and closer walk towards financial independence. It's where they no longer have to ask, but they'll be able to provide. And God is not bankrupt. We do our part, He does His part. The key is trying to understand what our part is. And in a context where all you've ever done is put your hand out and wait for someone from some outside the country to help, that's what you, in a sense, have been trained to do. You've become accustomed to that. But now they're beginning to see that there are so many other ways that they could do, and it's possible to raise funds. And all through Latin America, we're seeing that happen. Thrift stores are possible in some places, certain types of thrift stores. There are other kinds of investment. One of the things that we're seeing is the Salvation Army in many parts of the world have tremendous land assets, but they're just completely undeveloped. And just again, with the right kind of plan, the right kind of good thinking, and appropriate investment, and we see this iterative process of smaller investments growing into bigger, and pretty soon you can just see by when you get to the point where I remember one thing that will always be in my mind, going to Kenya and talking to a young officer there, just glowing. You look at his face and you can just see the joy of the Lord in his face. And he was just so on fire. And we were in the slums of Kibera. The Kibera slums, some of the worst slums in the world. And around Kibera, and there are literally thousands of people there. The Salvation Army has an unbelievable ministry. And a few within the slum itself. What a ministry they have. But funding is always an issue, and all these people are living in slums for a reason. But then I looked around the walls of the slum and saw these factories. Many of the people who lived in the slums actually worked in the factory. I looked at this young captain. I said, "Have you ever thought about going into that factory and asking the business owner if he'd be willing to support your ministry here in Kibera?" And he looked at me like, "Why in the world would I do that?" And he actually said it. "Well, why would I do that? He's got his own church." And it was, he honestly did not realize that there's so much more going on than what a typical church is going on in Kibera. And there are people that are willing to contribute and support uh, the phenomenal ministries that are there. And I look forward to the day where that young captain can say, could go in, have the courage to ask for that gift, to show a appropriate proposal that would satisfy a donor's concern, and walk out with the check, and finally for the first time say, I can do this. I can do this, because in reality they can. But we have to help them to begin to believe that that's possible, and show them in any way that we can. And then they can show us things that they can do that we would have no idea that they would be able to do in that context. It's exciting work to be a part of, but I'm thrilled that we might be able to play a little part in a territory's journey towards financial independence.
The pandemic has probably pushed a lot of these countries to thinking about self-sustainability, whether they like to think of it or not. One of the things that I love about SAWSO is the power of collaboration. You're not the only kid on the block in a lot of these countries, but the Salvation Army is in a lot of places where other NGOs, other Christian organizations kind of come to the Salvation Army as a conduit. I always think about all the freshwater initiatives, especially when you pick a country like Kenya, and the impact that the Salvation Army has on the education system in that country, and a lot of different things is very, very interesting. You must be kind of thrilled to see all of this kind of collaboration occurring worldwide.
It is exciting to see the donor offices working together, and frankly, even uh, other NGOs are beginning to recognize the breadth of the Salvation Army in 131 countries. The challenge is that we seem to be stretched very thin in some places, and it really comes down to capacity in so many ways. I mean, there are government dollars that could potentially be available, but that brings on a whole nother set of challenges for our comrades on the front line, because with those government dollars comes tremendous accountability, and just the infrastructure necessary to be able to do some of those things becomes difficult. So that's why so much of our focus is not just about project, but actually the building of capacity. That's why SAWSO doesn't go in and just do for them. We go in and come alongside and help shore them up so they can learn to do for themselves, and then we can continue to provide the resources, and they're on their own. It's just another way of doing it. But you're right. We are spread out there in 131 countries plus, and it's very attractive to some other NGOs when they want to find another partner to work with. We have a presence. Some of the big corporations that we're working with, FedEx and UPS, and they get excited about the Salvation Army's footprint, and are able to take full advantage of the relationships that we share with them. And when it comes to a disaster time, especially, we find those corporate partners stepping up and making significant contributions to the cause, and make it possible to do so much more than what we otherwise be able to do.
Yeah, you're talking about so many projects. I think of the nuclear meltdown in Japan that you responded to and helped, revitalize the economy in some communities in Japan. What you did in Southeast Asia after the tsunami. So those are big projects you handle, but also you handle microcredit efforts and, small community-based efforts to help people become self-sufficient. So it's really amazing. I'm just curious, we know that our God is not limited to one culture. What do you see? How do you see God moving in different parts of the world these days?
It's interesting that you would say that, because when I first began this journey of international development work in Nigeria that I mentioned earlier, I went into that country and I could not believe the Salvation Army and either other churches were just on fire, just on fire. And the church was growing so rapidly. It seemed like every place we went, there was another congregation being introduced to us that was being birthed. And they looked at us Americans, and their interest was the funds that we can bring to the table. And there were times, I got to be honest with you, Jeff, that I actually said to myself, why do I want to get so or talk so much about money and raising money and money? What they've got here is more than what we would ever hope to have in America. And we have all the abundance that we have, but we don't have the infilling of the Holy Spirit and the power that's so obvious, and the evangelism that's taking place, and the church is on fire there. I didn't want to participate in some way that's going to, distract from that by talking about money. So we have to find that balance, and we have found that in so many places. The army is on fire in Africa and India and so many places, and as a denomination, it's growing rapidly, and we praise God for that. And to be honest, I in contrast, we see the tremendous part that we play in America in being able to provide support around the Army world. Such a large percentage of what is happening around the world is because of America's support. And we thank God for that. And maybe that's our part right now in our history, because from a denominational vantage point, well, we got some exciting things going. It's nothing like what's going on overseas.
I was reading something recently where someone was kind of condemning this lecturer, talking about the business of the church, and we need to go about soul saving, et cetera, et cetera. And the guy was saying, look, the church, it's all about biology. That we are an organic body of Christ. We have this need for structure and this need for change and this need for accountability and all those sorts of things. And I look at SAWSO as feeding into so many different aspects of the work of the body of Christ through the Salvation Army worldwide. And it's, for me, since I've been here, my mind has been just blown open by the work you and your team do worldwide for the Salvation Army. And it just makes me very proud to know you and to be associated with the humble work and the hard work you guys are doing.
I appreciate hearing that, and I feel it's a real privilege to be a part of this. And it's too bad that it's going to be coming to an end for me in the not too distant future. As you know, I'm pushing up towards retirement, and we'll see transition within this year, and I'm excited for the future.
What is this retirement you're talking about?
Well, you know all about it, my friend.
Yes, because every day your wife, I think, is giving me the countdown. which has been, but when you retire, it'll be close to 44 years doing this.
Yes, about 43 and a half.
Which really, again, hats off to both you and your wife for being faithful in your officership over this year, over all these decades, all the people that you have touched and ministered to in the Central Territory and now worldwide. And I watch you when you're around my wife. We recently interviewed Colonel Cindy, and you guys all kind of talk in business tongue language together. It's kind of very exciting to see. But you're a man of integrity, and you have the good of others at heart. And I know you're working at heart of making sure that the legacy of the SAWSO office continues in working to this seamless transition as you move into the blessed new life that you have of retirement around the corner.
That's very kind of you. Very kind of you.
Jeff,
Sounds well earned. Sounds well earned. I would just point out that, I think of the SAWSO folks, your department, what you do with SAWSO, the travel, the dedication, the hours spent, the reaching into different cultures. And it's not always, in easy spots. Nigeria is going through, quite a lot of upheaval now. So, you're kind of on the forefront there.
I think you would Anyone who's done a lot of international travel soon discover it's not what people imagine it to be.
No.
We're going on vacation. We're not going to do tours and stuff. We're going to some of the most difficult, challenging places in the world, and we feel blessed and privileged to be able to do that. And God is sufficient and takes care of our needs, and we're grateful for that. We just want to bring honor and glory to Him in our efforts. And I couldn't.
Yeah, and I noticed none of your staff has their own Lear jets. You know, they're not flying their G5s. They're flying coach.
Yeah.
And sitting in coach, trying to get to Jakarta, Indonesia in 28 hours. It's not a lot of fun. But
it's amazing how your biological clock can get messed up so easily.
Yeah, I often think I just kind of wonder for myself if I'm going to do any more international travel, and you wonder when is your department hitting the road again?
Well, it's still on hold, but it probably, we're waiting to see how things continue to evolve. Of course, we want everyone to be safe, and we're concerned about our people on the implementation side as well. We want to make sure that they're protected, and so it's probably likely will be sometime this fall before we're able to get back to it, and it's going to have to be done very, very carefully and think through it very well, so that we're thinking of all the implications of that travel.
Well, it's very even convoluted. Going back into Jeff's home state of New Jersey, I think you have to pay people, and you have to quarantine for 2 years. I don't know, Jeff. What?
Well, you have to have muscle around you to kind of pave the way.
That's right.
So you have to have connections to get into the inner city. You know?
If I ever want to go up to New Jersey or Rhode Island, where Elizabeth's from, I got to take my hard hitting crew here with me. So. But Colonel Tom, we thank you so much for joining us and for enlightening us, inspiring us and our listeners to the worldwide work that you are doing, just a floor below us. And I know your team, like our team, is working remotely. Some folks are in the office. Some people are just working from their basements as well. But we know that everyone there is working from their heart. They believe in the mission of the Salvation Army and bringing the life changing message of the gospel through direct and indirect ways. So God bless you, sir, and thank you for the many, many years of service. I just wish, I would have met you a long time ago, because you are just a joy to be with, and I for one, I know will miss you and your wife when you ride off from here in retirement. But thank you for all that you have done and will continue to do. It's not like you're on the shelf yet.
No. So. Well, thank you so much for the time today and for your kind words. We appreciate it. It's a privilege to be able to do this.
Well, that's going to end this episode of the Fight for Good podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to follow the War Cry and Peer Magazine on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The War Cry is now available to you free of charge at www.thewarcry.org. If you'd like a hard copy of the War Cry arriving in your mailbox, Jeff, I think it takes a little longer now, according to the way the post office works. But we're still getting the hard copies out to you, and you can subscribe for $1 a month. Elizabeth, I think I got that right this time. $1 a month at thewarcry.org. You can subscribe there. Also, don't forget to read our Peer Magazine. And Jeff, we're up for some awards with both War Cry and Peer Magazine very soon with the EPA, right?
That's right. The Evangelical Press Association does have a contest every year where they try to highlight what's good in the Christian press, and we are a perennial presence there. So
we're so grateful for the opportunity that we have in national publications to share the message of the gospel through the War Cry and through Peer Magazine. So check it out. Give us a thumbs up on any of our social media feeds. Don't give us a thumbs down. We don't like thumbs down. You can just bypass us if you give us a thumbs down. Elizabeth, what do you do with thumbs downs? What does a positive person do with thumbs downs?
You just let it go. Let it go. Let it live.
Let it go. Oh, I hear a song. Jeff, ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, until next time, thanks for listening. This has been the Fight for Good podcast. Bye for now.
Subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts.